which is great. But yeah, let's go ahead and get going. So excited to host our first customer webinar with you, Tori, in Epic Gardening. So the official title of this webinar is Optimizing Warehouse Processes with NetSuite WMS. So we'll talk through a lot of things inventory related, NetSuite WMS, which we'll get into here first, and just overall, right, some of the advantages and benefits of using NetSuite as a platform for connecting inventory to finance and accounting, as well as warehouse processes. And then, definitely hopeful to get some of your feedback on just overall what it's like working with a NetSuite consulting firm like Racette Consulting. So again, welcome. I'll introduce myself and then kick it off to you, Tori, and then we'll just dive right in. So, my name's Emil. I'm the CEO and founder of Racette Consulting. We're a NetSuite Alliance consulting firm. And so all we do is implement, optimize, support NetSuite. I myself come from a NetSuite consulting background for the past 8 years. I actually started at Oracle NetSuite in the professional services organization and then moved over into the partner space and then started Racette Consulting 2 years ago. So we have, a number of customers here in Colorado as well, which is where Epic Gardening headquarters are. So we have a number of customers here in Colorado, but as well as other states in Canada as well. And kind of the industries that we focus in, I think Epic Gardening is a great example of customers that we have experience and solutions in. Is manufacturing, warehouse distribution companies, just products related companies, right? Retail companies. And we do, especially well when there's kind of back and forth integrations, right, between outside systems like Shopify or other e-commerce platforms. So I think we play well in that space. And we have a number of solutions that, can support companies that are in that industry. So, commissions modules, NetSuite WMS optimizations and enhancements. We have a manufacturing console for some of the more complex manufacturing industries. And so just want to throw that out there. But I'll kick it off over to Tori, our special guest, to introduce herself and maybe a little bit about your background and Epic Gardening's background.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Tori Mauser. I am the Director of Technology at Epic Gardening. I've been at Epic for about 2.5 years now. And when I started, we had just finished the acquisition of a company called Botanical Interests. So in that, we were kind of trying to find our path in terms of how do we integrate our systems together? What does this mean long term? What do we want that to look like? And so for some background kind of on the brands, Epic Gardening is an e-commerce brand, but also a media company. We focus on a whole media network that we've built ourselves internally. We have blog, video, TV. We have over 11 million followers, I think, across all of our platforms now, with a focus on high quality education and entertainment content, while also providing the tools to actually kind of follow along with your own garden. So with that being said, that's the kind of Epic Gardening side. And then we acquired Botanical Interests, which is a seed company that is based in Broomfield, Colorado, which is kind of what brought us to you in Denver. And Botanical has been around for, I think it's over 30 years now. And so when you think about, a newer e-commerce brand like Epic, which while it was founded by Kevin in about 2017, it didn't really become an e-commerce company until I think 2021 or so. And then a company like Botanical Interest that's been around for about 30 years, that really has a focus more on wholesale. There's a lot of back-end technology that you really have to get creative with and figuring out what does that architecture look like? How do we connect these two companies together? On the Epic side, we have Shopify, like you mentioned. We have Amazon. We have, other channels that we're trying to pull in like Meta and TikTok. And then on the BI side, we have our wholesale company and we have all of our different wholesale customers. We also have a Shopify store, which has now kind of gotten a little TLC over the last couple of years as well. So We
Yeah.
got pretty creative, but that is kind of the journey that brought us to NetSuite, which is, still always a work in progress, but it's been great with you guys.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, welcome. The part that is especially interesting to me that you mentioned there, just in the whole Epic Gardening journey, is the education part, right? So you have started as, social media and blog and really teaching people how to have their own garden, start their own garden, grow their own vegetables, fruits, which and then kind of grew from there and kind of, grew the following and then kind of expanded more into products, Shopify, and then obviously the strategic botanical interest acquisition,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kevin, our founder, he's great. He's got a very creative brain. I don't think he'd necessarily say this was his end intention when he got into gardening. But he's always been creative. And so when he got into gardening, he started to kind of document that journey on YouTube. He started amassing quite the following, and people were asking, how do I get this bed that you're using? And
Yeah.
the start of it was he ended up making a partnership with the bed company that he preferred. He started shipping them over to himself in containers, and he would ship them directly from San Diego, which is where his homestead is.
Mm.
And then it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great job, Kevin. If you ever listen to this webinar one day, have a lot of respect for what you've done and some of your vision and all this. So, yeah, that's awesome. So let's kind of move into kind of our first topic here, just the overall, some of the background into starting the implementation for NetSuite, which I think you were heavily involved in, and I believe there was a phasing aspect to that, right? So you didn't just implement all of NetSuite in one go. It was a kind of a strategic implementation and including different modules and pieces of NetSuite over that timeline, right?
Yeah, correct. So I was brought in more towards the end of phase one, I'd say, but I was very much involved in just at least monitoring what the plan was. So we landed on NetSuite as our ERP. I want to say we began that integration, gosh, maybe in 2023,
Mhm.
and probably went live with the ERP side of it by January 2024 or so. And a lot of that was focused on how do we, one, compile all the data that existed at this 30-year-old company? How do we get that meaningfully into NetSuite in as clean as we possibly can?
Mhm.
And then we really focused more on the accounting side of things. So making sure that our accounting team and the finance team had what they need to continue to run the business from the accounting standpoint. So really the focus there was on inventory, getting the sales records loaded in, being able to just get live financials going. And then from there, we started to kind of look at, okay, what's needed next from this long goal of getting off of these legacy platforms and onto something that's more modern and cloud-based. And so, we looked at our warehouse and we realized our warehouse was also built on these legacy stilts that were not really seamless in trying to integrate into anything cloud-based or modern. And so we took a look at different WMS options. And because we had already implemented NetSuite ERP, we felt that it was probably the easiest route because we were trying to go pretty quickly with our WMS implementation. And then we ended up, I think, going live with our NetSuite WMS by July of 2024.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's a conversation that, we as consultants have a lot, right? There's kind of two approaches, especially in new implementations, right? There's a kind of big bang approach, and you're just including everything kind of in one go. Usually those are longer timelines, right? More scope, more modules, more cost to implement, versus what it sounds like the strategy you guys opted with is phasing, right? So getting live on NetSuite, getting your inventory in NetSuite, some of your history, static data just to make the system work right on day one, and then kind of phasing in NetSuite WMS in a later phase, right? Which I think is a great strategy. There's different ways to, I think, approach that conversation. But I think that the phasing approach definitely makes sense for a lot of companies that are evaluating, implementing NetSuite or just adding on additional modules, right? Was the NetSuite WMS decision Obviously it's embedded inside of NetSuite. It's a great tool and a great platform to connect inventory with warehouse processes, right? Picking, packing, shipping. So it sounds like that was a very kind of logical, rational decision to have all of that connected, but also choosing NetSuite tool, which is embedded directly inside of NetSuite, right?
Yeah, exactly. And with the seasonality of our company, so with Botanical Interest being a seed company, our seasons kind of turn right around July 1. And so if we were to have waited longer, we really wouldn't have been able to make any sort of change in our WMS for another year and a half. And
Mm,
so we kind of looked at what does that run time look like? How many months do we realistically have to implement something new before we have to kind of sit with what we have?
mhm.
And so we made that quick decision to go with NetSuite WMS, like you said, because it's already embedded within NetSuite and it's one less integration that we have to try to think through building.
Mhm.
There's pros and cons to any decision like that. It's a huge undertaking to go live with something new in a warehouse that's been operating under, the same processes and systems for 20 to 30 years. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we'll talk a little bit more about the change management aspect and kind of findings and results. But yeah, I think all good points. So you went live with NetSuite WMS. I think you said July 1st, right? 2024. And that's more or less around the time that we started engaging with Epic Gardening and supporting you, right? So in that time frame, and I remember going on site in July and having calls, and I think having someone kind of follow along in the warehouse, and I was asking questions, trying to understand right what some of the pain points were, because it wasn't kind of all smooth as most software implementations are right from the beginning, right? So can you maybe talk about some of those challenges of just using NetSuite WMS from maybe a systems perspective and how, just the timing and when we were brought in and kind of some of those initial quick wins?
Sure, yeah. So when we were running through kind of the implementation of the WMS, we had another partner and they were amazing in terms of getting our systems ready. So what I mean by that is, NetSuite thought it was ready for the WMS to be live in the warehouse. Everything systematically looked good.
Mhm.
We had, our inventory set properly, or so we thought. We had the processes kind of ironed down and walked through with the warehouse. But when we actually went to kind of transition to the live environment in the warehouse itself and started picking our actual orders, that's when we started to run into, oh shoot, maybe this actually isn't set up the way that we need it to be, or this out of the box NetSuite solution might not be exactly what we need in terms of the types of orders that we have. So,
Right.
a good example of a struggle that we found was with seeds, you're ordering, a very small dollar value unit, but you're ordering multiple units. So one customer might have 20 to 40 units on their order
Mhm.
across maybe 15 different SKUs, for example. That's 15 different lines on that specific order. And if you're having to go through 7 screens just to pick a single seed packet, people were looking at me like I was crazy when we were trying to get this system running. And so, we were thinking through, well, what does this screen actually mean? Do we really need this screen? Are there customization options for us? And so that's kind of how we started our conversation with you, Emil, is we were walking through that process. We were showing you what that actually meant in person in our warehouse. And the time that it took to pick a single order from the out of the box solution was not cohesive to the scale that we were about to go into with our peak season.
hmm Yeah, and that's I think your point you're getting at it. It's also a volumes consideration, right? You're picking so much volume with these small seed packets
Mhm.
that if you're going through one line 7 times and you have 7 steps, and your pickers are used to 2 or 3 clicks and a scan, and the pick
Mhm.
is done, right, from the legacy system that can cause some pushback and obviously some concerns as far as picking times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember that very clearly, and I think opening up kind of some of the back end of NetSuite WMS, and ultimately what we ended up doing is opening up the configuration of the NetSuite WMS, especially the mobile app, and defaulting some of those fields, right? So One example is, for example, defaulting the preferred bin so that where you were picking, right after the scan, after choosing the preferred bin, it just automatically skipped that screen. So kind of a nice optimization there. And ultimately, I think we went down from out of the box, 6 or 7 clicks to about three, just about 3 or 4, depending on kind of the pick type. So, yeah, hopefully that results in some long-term time savings, right?
For sure. Yeah, it definitely cut our pick time per order in less than half, I'd say. Like you said, we defaulted certain fields, we just fully skipped other screens altogether.
Mm.
Um, and when we're moving from something that was, built in-house on a legacy system, they were, using laptops that were probably 15 years old. And there were no real I guess, kind of stage gates in the picking process. They really could have done anything that they wanted in the picking process. And so not only are we kind of implementing and introducing a new system on a new tablet, but we're also introducing some of the more like financial controls and accounting controls that hadn't existed yet either, where, someone had to confirm the quantity that they picked, which that's maybe a waste of time to somebody because they think that they've picked it correctly. But when you look at it from a process standpoint, you might want to have that step in there so you can actually have somebody validate, review, and confirm the quantity that they've picked. So there's some trade-off conversations that we also had with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think the job of a good consultant, right? Is yes, you were moving from, like you mentioned, kind of a legacy system where anything and everything goes, and end users love that, to maybe a more kind of controlled system with permissions and restrictions that a user might be able to do. So like you said, there's trade-offs. I think ultimately we found a good balance, right, of speed times of picking with
Mhm.
some of those controls and making sure that because ultimately everything connects to your accounting, right? So if a user accidentally types in 40 instead of that four, all of a sudden your inventory is going to be out of balance, right? So yeah, some of those controls are important too. Um, so, talking a little bit about some of the change management aspect, then from the user's perspective, right?
Mhm.
Like putting ourselves, and I remember walking with you through some of those lines and observing pickers as they were going through it and getting some of that real-time feedback and kind of processing some of that feedback into potential changes. What are some of the things that maybe went well and maybe could have gone better as far as maybe some of that rollout and just communication to everyone of, hey, we're going to be moving, away from the legacy picking program to NetSuite WMS.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of what went well, it's everyone was ready for a change. We had plenty of conversations leading up to it. We were explaining the importance of, pulling in some new technology to make sure that everything was cohesive. But in terms of what we could have done better, I think more hands-on walkthroughs before we went live would have been helpful with the actual pickers. We did it as a team. We were trying to test everything, but in terms of pressure testing, I think that we could have done that a little bit better. Similarly, I think even just having documentation at every pick desk that they could refer back to would have been really helpful to have up front. Even some tutorial videos that we could have maybe provided ahead of time that people could have sat through and just familiarize themselves with what those screens looked like and the why behind them. Going from something that was so free form to something as I wouldn't say rigid as NetSuite, but just a little bit more controlled, like you said. That was definitely the hardest hurdle to get over because they're just asking, well, why do I need to do XYZ? And a lot of those conversations, I think, kind of really came to a head when we were in our peak season, when all the order volume was coming in, and I just saw pickers standing there looking at their screen, waiting for it to load to the next one. And so,
Mhm.
I think one, pressure testing, two, having some more documentation available, three, pulling in the users as in so they feel like they had more ownership over the changes as well versus it was just being passed down. As we started making the helpful changes throughout, I would, go down into the warehouse. I'd spend a lot of time with the users, and by the end of it, they really felt like they were a part of the change team, which I think if we had done that sooner, we would have had a lot more success. And so that was definitely a learning point for me. Separately, with your guys' help with the changing of the screens, kind of reducing some of the clutter of what the out of the box solution is. I do have to say the last time that I was there in person and walking and I asked for any sort of qualms or complaints, everybody said none. And that was probably the big win for me. So that I wish we could have started there, but we got
It's
there.
always it's always a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
There's no fun if we start with the end solution.
Yeah.
But no, I think those are all good, great points. I think another good one is just the importance of being there on site, right? Both with the ultimate stakeholders, right? Like yourselves, Roger, the other warehouse managers that are making some of these, decisions on just warehouse changes that ultimately impact everybody.
Mhm.
But I think that some of those initial even walkthroughs for me and just seeing the real life process and then translating that into NetSuite functionality is crucial, right? Especially in like warehouse distribution, products, anything that has the physical inventory component, whether you're manufacturing it or just storing it for shipping is crucial. Awesome. So what about some of the maybe training around, the impacts to the ERP? So obviously a lot of our work has been, at least together, has been in the NetSuite WMS mobile app, right? So defaulting some of the field values, we talked about that. I think we also added a tile right within the mobile WMS to pack displays, right? So that kind of group those types of items together and giving the pickers ultimately the ability to pick similar items that belong to the same physical display for your seeds. That was another big one. But what about maybe the interaction, right, between the impact on reporting? So I remember, kind of talking to you and others through how to create safe searches, how to configure customized reports. How important was that, especially for obviously you as, stakeholders, but also just management and everyone that's in NetSuite?
Yeah, that was so I don't know about anyone else listening, but in terms of all the users at Epic, I don't think anybody had really had experience in NetSuite. And so when you look at something like NetSuite, it feels a little bit like a beast when you're trying to learn it. Saved searches are kind of the foundation of all reporting. It's kind of the foundation of all of our integrations that we've built between Shopify, Amazon, et cetera. And, when I first went to create a save search, it looked like a foreign language. Um, I think those tutorials that we had with you guys were essential, and one wasn't enough. I think we might have had three walkthroughs. But once you finally got the save search piece down, being able to pull data from a centralized location was huge. Like I said, we had all of these legacy programs. A lot of them were access databases. A lot of them you only could go to one specific person in the office and he would have to create the report for you and pull it and send it. If you wanted to change it, you had to go back to him. He'd have to edit it. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a specific person bottleneck. He had so many requests coming in every single day. He couldn't focus on anything else. And that was just for reporting.
Mhm.
So when you transition to something that is a little bit more holistic, you have all your data in one place. It thankfully saved a lot of time, despite the initial hurdle of learning how to actually get the reports out of NetSuite. But once you figure that out, it's been great. I think, the other piece that we struggled with initially was from that initial phase one implementation, where we just kind of data dumped all of the data that we had before we maybe cleansed it a little bit more. That proved to be a little bit more difficult as well. So in terms of a learning point, um, I think making sure that what data you do drop in is actually clean and needed versus just doing it for the sake of dropping in data to have. Um, we've cleaned that since, so reporting is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately, a lot of NetSuite's strengths and benefit is the ability for users to self-help, right? And create their own safe searches with, to be fair, some of that initial upfront training, like you mentioned, and knowledge transfer. But ultimately, another one of my core beliefs as a consultant is that my job would be to make you a better NetSuite user so that you can also be self-reliant for those things generating your own reports, right? Customizing your own dashboards. Obviously, we're always available and would love to help you do all those things. But ultimately, right, just growing the NetSuite knowledge and ecosystem and helping users become self-reliant for a lot of those like core functions of NetSuite is one of my core beliefs. And hopefully that translated well for you. I know Cole has also helped a lot of people, right, throughout Epic Gardening and the warehouse, yourself, and optimizing NetSuite.
For sure. Yeah, no, Cole's been amazing. I think I probably asked him and Ryan on your team to create so many safe searches for me because at first I just couldn't get my brain around it. Now they make so much sense. But I think, like I said, it's a little bit of a different language. Once you learn it, it becomes second nature. I'd still consider myself very much a beginner user of NetSuite. I think the dashboarding is kind of the next step, but thankfully, we have SMEs for that now internally that we rely on for some more of that help. But yeah, like I said, it's really just been such a benefit to have it all in one place. We are still, we still have a few legacy programs that we are working on dismantling and pulling into NetSuite, but it's night and day different than where we were 1 to 2 years ago.
Yeah. And that's, I think, where ultimately companies reap the most benefits out of NetSuite, right? Is, in just bringing in that phasing conversation again, getting live on NetSuite. And now all of a sudden you have this, data repository where everything is connected or has, the potential to be connected, especially for bringing on those legacy systems. So
Mhm.
one of those that we helped you guys with was your commissions module, and just bringing that. So that, I guess, a little background, that was outside, right, as another legacy system, but it wasn't connected to NetSuite at all. And so myself, as well as David, kind of talk through some of that opportunity of bringing your ultimately your commissions, but also allowing partners to log in through a portal that we'd created, as well as all the financials, right? So the calculations, the consideration of which invoices should be considered to be paid out as a commission, right, to that partner. And some of the custom record structure with that, like I said, the ability for partners to log in, see their orders, see their commission checks. So when talking through some of that phasing, and obviously we're always available to talk through, those phasing aspects of, hey, we're still doing something, in Excel, or we're still doing something in this other application that we'd love to bring into NetSuite. And I think ultimately that's where you guys are seeing now a lot of the benefits is you're live on NetSuite. Now it's, time to start thinking about what other pieces and parts can we bring into NetSuite, because it is extremely, flexible, so that you can continue to just have everything in one place, which sounds like that's ultimately your goal and your vision, hopefully.
Yeah, that's definitely the end goal. With the commissions module specifically, uh, the way that David and I kind of looked at what our plan should be in terms of bringing legacy into NetSuite was what is the most manual time suck of our company right now? And we start to chip away at it from that perspective. So his team was spending so much time trying to determine what these commissions were. Again,
Mhm.
it goes back to reporting. They had to go back to one specific person on my team that could figure out how to pull the report from the Access database. And so again, it's one of those things, what brings the most value? How can we kind of silo that and then cut it out of legacy and bring it into NetSuite? And so we still have a lot more projects like that, but commissions was probably one of the easiest wins to point to in terms of manual time reduced. One other piece that it's not necessarily related to the commissions module, but just in general that I love about having NetSuite versus legacy is I come from an audit background. And so anytime something went awry, I would ask, okay, can we at least trace where this went wrong? And usually the answer was no before NetSuite because legacy didn't have any sort of logs. It didn't really have any sort of transaction data to follow.
Mhm.
Um, and so if we were to look at a specific inventory SKU, we thought that we had 5,000 units and the next day it went to zero. What happened? You actually are able to trace that through the system. And that was, again, such a huge win for me because that was happening every day for us in terms of the large inventory swings based on our wholesale business.
Yeah. Yeah, big shout out to engineers who design system information and
Thank
and that.
God.
I mean, that was kind of part of NetSuite's, kind of structure and foundation is that the ability to audit and see everything that happens to a records, when, by who, timestamp. So yeah, absolutely. Um, so kind of wrapping up maybe the warehouse and just like industry conversation, right? Another kind of challenge, I think that kind of just ties in with the seasonality of the business. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, is just the omni-channel concept, right? Of selling on all these different platforms at the same time. One of the things we helped you guys with is automating some of those like wave release schedules, right? And grouping
Mhm.
item families together, and ultimately grouping items that are similar for all different types of orders across all your different channels. Can you talk through maybe some of the, I guess, thought that went into that from your perspective, and kind of organizing those different channels, and ultimately some of the result after maybe the implementation of those different sales channels and those release schedules?
Sure, yeah. So, I've mentioned this before, but we are largely a seasonal business. And so, in our down season, a lot of this didn't necessarily matter, and it never really came to the surface in terms of how do we prioritize our orders. Every day we'd be able to get through every order that came through.
Mhm.
Once high season hit, we started to see some of those, underlying issues that we hadn't thought through start to kind of peek at the surface. And so one of those being, if for some reason we can't keep up with order volume, how do we isolate which orders need to go out first? Like I said, we have our wholesale business, we have our botanical interest Shopify, we have our Epic Gardening Shopify, we have Amazon, we have TikTok, Meta, et cetera. And so when you think about kind of the overall impact, if you want to stay in good standing with Amazon, you have to make sure that you're hitting those SLAs. Same thing with Meta, TikTok, etc. If we start to fall behind on those, we lose our standings, we lose our even just our search result listing. And so what we did was we were able to isolate what are those critical sales channels using our sales channel field. We created a wave release schedule where the very first wave that would run would pull all of those priority orders that would come through, and the warehouse would work on those first. And then
Mhm.
from there, we'd be able to kind of chip away at the rest of the orders from a FIFO basis. But that was really critical in maintaining our account standing in all of those different channels. It's pretty hard to come back from if you start to lose that at a high rate.
Yeah. That's great, and I think all great points, right? And it's, from my perspective, interesting to use NetSuite functionality to make that easier, right? That sorting by channel, the prioritization per channel. Because ultimately, you're right. In this day and age, if you're not one of the first, even five results that people can scroll to, you're not going to get as many sales, right? So that's great, and I think the intersection between some of that and some of the omni-channel, right, of your selling on five, six, seven, eight different channels,
Mhm.
and translating that into NetSuite features and functionality to support that, is amazing. It's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought that we had already kind of solved for it. And then again, I was down in the warehouse and I was noticing that people were manually going through orders, trying to identify them. And that's when I, ran to you trying to figure out, okay, what is the way to do this systematically so we can reduce that manual time. So thankfully we were able to get that implemented very quickly. It was a pretty easy one.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Um, Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys will continue to scale and bring on additional functionality and solutions and modules in NetSuite. So just kind of wrapping up the discussion here along those lines, and this wouldn't be a ERP or technology webinar if we didn't bring in AI and its impact in some ways. I know you and I talked a little bit about the new NetSuite AI connector, right? Using MCP and kind of the interface with Claude. Is there anything that you guys are using, AI related, either inside of NetSuite that you think is, benefiting users or yourself, or anything you have your eye on to try next?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in that MCP connector. It's on our roadmap, I want to say by the end of this month to kind of start digging in there. In terms of AI within NetSuite, we're not utilizing that yet. But in our project management, we are a ClickUp company.
Mhm.
Love ClickUp. It's actually a San Diego-based company, which is where I'm based. And they have some really amazing AI features within ClickUp that help us kind of sort what tasks we're falling behind on as a technology team. It helps us automate our sprints. It helps us automate our estimates. I've also integrated that within our Slack channels. And so, whether it's daily or weekly updates for our progress on the team, we get the summaries automatically sent to Slack. So the org has an idea of where we are with some of our developments that are kind of more behind the scene projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really it on the AI front. We don't even really have an AI, I'd say policy yet. So that's also something that we need to kind of come up with. But yes, I'm definitely excited about the NetSuite piece.
Yeah. Well, if I could there, so we talked about, safe searches and generating safe searches earlier and some of the training and just base foundation of, data and what fields to pull in when you're trying to query different data. We are we've already rolled out, but actively kind of improving and developing what we're calling an AI agent, which is directly inside of NetSuite and ultimately results in a person, right, an end user in NetSuite kind of giving the agent what they're looking for as far as a safe search or a report. And we've gotten it to the point where that AI agent ultimately creates the safe search for you, and that you're able to view, obviously edit, right, change the results or criteria as you want it. But ultimately, I think, and especially for new users, we've seen a lot of benefits of plugging that in and letting the user just in normal language, right, type what they're looking for, and then the AI agent kind of asks a few clarifying questions to kind of get to what the data record is, the time frame, some of the fields that you're looking for, and ultimately creates the safe search for you. So, I do see in the future a world where a user doesn't need to know all the intricacies of how to create a safe search. I think that world is sooner than we all may think, with tools that, Racette Consulting is developing. Other partners are developing, obviously, NetSuite backed by Oracle, will continue to improve on and release more AI features. That's obviously a big topic for Suite World, and just NetSuite in general, right? Is how do we embed more AI tools and let users interact with these agents and other AI tools to just make their lives easier, right?
Yeah, I would love that. With the AI agent that you guys are developing, is that something that is already available within NetSuite and our partnership, or is that something that you build to each specific partner?
No, I mean, it's available. It's generic enough to where it's essentially available to any customer. Right
Mm.
now, we're developing it in our own internal development accounts. But it's definitely something that we're also getting feedback on from, some of our customers, some of our users. How can we make this better? And ultimately, what is it that a customer is looking for, to essentially ask, right? So right now, the focus has been initially, generation of reports and safe searches to start with. We also have kind of a like a help guide where you can essentially ask it, where might I go to see like the component where used inquiry as an example, or any other reports that are out of the box, and it would essentially give you a link to go to that page. Is that as helpful as just using the native search bar at the top of the NetSuite screen? Hmm, maybe not, right? So in my opinion, the intersection and where AI really makes sense, especially in relation to NetSuite, is when you can query on the data, right? Which ultimately lives directly inside of your NetSuite and should be your most accurate data representative of your business and how it's doing. So I think in my mind, where the real benefit lies in NetSuite and AI agent directly inside of NetSuite is the intersection between a user giving it kind of natural language prompts and then it being able to query, since it's in NetSuite, it has access to your data, it being able to query and give you results, right? In the future, I see, as Claude is doing today, just some better visualization, right? Maybe dashboards. Maybe you want to create a sales specific dashboard or an inventory or a procurement specific dashboard with natural language prompts, right? So those are all things that we're considering as far as adding to our development. Right now, we're focusing on how can users ask simple questions and how can the AI agent give you a safe search that you can see the data right then and there.
Hmm. Love that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, last question for you. I think all great points. Would you have any, advice? So future companies, anyone in the audience that might be considering making the switch to NetSuite or considering maybe implementing, some of those additional phases that we talked about, more
Mhm.
modules, anything that, you've seen while implementing NetSuite and supporting NetSuite the past few years that you might just want to give as tips or advice or anything in that?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think I've mentioned quite a few of my learnings throughout the webinar. But number one would be to expect delays. We thought that we had built in some buffer time for our deadlines and our go live, but if you're working from kind of a foundation that I was working from, which was a company that had been around for 30 years, merging with a company that is new and cloud-based and looking at legacy systems, it's never quite as easy as you think it is from the surface. And even if you don't expect it to be easy, it's harder than you would expect. It's a big web of interconnected dominoes that the second you pull one out, the rest of it kind of breaks. And so my biggest piece of advice would be to build in a lot of delays and set expectations that, it's okay if there are bumps in the road and that, you'll be able to work through those. Another bit would be to really have a good foundational data dump that you bring into NetSuite. I think if we had spent a little bit more time on that initial implementation and looking at the data that we were bringing in, it would have saved us a lot of the time on the back end trying to then correct all that bad data and the impact that it had on our reporting, our inventory, our financials, our inventory count data and history. And so that's another big piece that I think kind of went a little bit unseen initially. We thought, oh, no problem, we'll just have our historical data to look back at. Well, it's not quite that simple. So that's another bit. And then again, I really do think phasing is the way to go. If you can identify pieces that you can bring in and start to chomp away at value add, I think it's a lot better in terms of trainings, change management, the ability to kind of optimize and maintain that new change within the system. If you're trying to bring in all these modules at once and you change one, you might not realize how that's impacting another. And then a lot of different things start to kind of fall apart as you do it all at once. And so I really do think it's important to kind of build a stage gate process for that as well.
Yeah. Amazing. I have nothing else to add. I think you wrapped it up perfectly. So
Great.
thank you so much for the time, sharing your experience, tips, advice. I think we all really much appreciate it. And I know, on our side of the fence, we definitely appreciate yourself, your involvement, Tori, and everyone over at Epic Gardening. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great working with you guys, and I will probably DM you right after this about AI.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks everyone on the line, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Tori.